Finally, Patriots will be produced right here in Ukraine. This weapon is a nightmare for Russian Kinzhal and Zircon missiles. How soon will they appear on the front lines? Stay tuned to find out. Meanwhile, at the NATO summit, there was a high-profile conversation between Zelensky and Trump. They talked about ending the war and about Putin.
Escalation. But this is the kind of escalation that could lead to the end of the war.
What did Zelensky say next to the American leader about negotiations, and why did it shock him so much? Find out in this episode. Give us a like, subscribe. Let's get started. On July 7th and 8th, another NATO summit was held in Ankara. And to be honest, it's been a long time since Ukraine has had such a packed news day. In just 2 days, they managed to sign agreements, announce the amount of aid, and make statements that had been hanging in the air for months without an answer. Let's start with the main point. On July 8th, during a joint press conference with Zelensky, Donald Trump announced the United States is ready to grant Ukraine a license to produce missiles for the Patriot systems. This is exactly the permission that Zelensky had been seeking since the Biden administration, and at that time he was refused. He repeated the request in June at the G7 meeting in France. And now finally the answer is yes. I suggest we watch a segment from the United News telethon. It covers the full context of the meeting between Trump and Zelensky.
The public part of the conversation between Presidents Trump and Zelensky lasted 40 minutes. Then they spent another hour behind closed doors. The President of the United States was in a good mood and joked a lot. The main news he announced was, without exaggeration, sensational. The United States is granting Ukraine a license to produce missiles for the Patriot air defense systems. These are the most effective at shooting down Russian ballistic missiles, and Zelensky had requested permission for joint production from the Biden administration, but they refused. Zelensky repeated his request to Trump last month at the G7 meeting in France. The American leader, however, added that he hasn't yet had a chance to ask the company that manufactures the Patriots. But it's clear that the main thing here is political will, which Trump has demonstrated.
A little bird told me that we will grant them the right to produce missiles for the Patriot system. We will show them how it's done. It's very complicated, but you'll figure it out quickly. After that, he won't be able to say that we're making them too slowly. Do it yourselves.
After the meeting in France in June, European leaders and global media claimed that Trump was pleasantly surprised by the effectiveness of Ukraine's long-range strikes on Russia. When asked by TSN what he thinks about these strikes, the president asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio to respond. He himself added only 2 phrases. This is an escalation, but it could lead to the end of the war.
I believe that this is one of the dynamics that have changed in this war over the past few months, namely that it is becoming increasingly difficult for the Russians to defend their own airspace. And we hope that this means there will now be room for negotiations to end the war.
This is an escalation, but it is the kind of escalation that could lead to the end of the war.
President Zelensky outlined the results that the defense forces have managed to achieve thanks to the rapid development of drone technologies. Russia is losing the initiative on the battlefield. Its logistics have been cut off. Trump declares for the first time the United States will buy Ukrainian drones. Although he previously said that they didn't need them, claiming that America's own drones were better.
Now the initiative has shifted into our hands. Not completely, but it has shifted. We are trying to move the war from the battlefield to the skies. That is why we have now begun to control the battlefield. It is very important and difficult to push them back when we have fewer people. But we found a way. We cut off their army's logistics in the air.
This is not the first time Trump has suggested that direct talks between Putin and Zelensky could soon take place. And he ironically asked the president of Ukraine whether he would agree to go to Moscow. Zelensky responded to the suggestion with a joke.
Would you go to Moscow?
I think that's difficult. There are a lot of Ukrainian drones there, so it's very dangerous.
Trump for the first time suggested that he might come to Ukraine and laughed himself at the thought of how much trouble that would cause his security detail. So he concluded he would rather do it after the war.
So during the meeting of the 2 presidents, a lot was discussed. But let's focus specifically on the license, because behind this news lies a figure that is truly chilling. Former Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba stated directly what Ukraine spends in 1 month, the Americans produce in an entire year. A month versus a year. This is not an exaggeration for effect. This is the cold math that exploded on July 6th. On that day, during a massive attack on Kyiv, Ukraine failed to intercept a single ballistic missile for the first time. They simply ran out of ammunition for the only system that is even capable of doing this. At the same time, the United States' own capacity allows them to produce no more than 700 missiles per year. Part of the production has already been localized in Europe by the Americans. Germany previously received a license for this, and Ukraine immediately took advantage by signing a contract with the German side for 600 missiles. Now let's talk about how quickly this will actually start working. And here it's important to be honest with the viewer, not just celebrate the headline. Military experts, including Valery Zhdanov and the analyst from the information resistance group Alexander Kovalenko, state directly, even if the license is transferred tomorrow, launching production could take from 6 months to a year. A secure facility is needed, expensive components, and the main issue is not just the transfer of technology, but also the safe location of the production itself in a country that is shelled every day. In other words, it's not a button you press and missiles start rolling off the assembly line the very next day. There is also another version as to why Trump made this statement right now. Military and political expert Dmytro Snehiryov believes that this is not only a practical decision, but also a political signal to Russia, a demonstration that the Kremlin's last lever of pressure on Ukraine, the shortage of ammunition against ballistic missiles, is disappearing. In other words, the statement works on two levels at once, as real military aid in the future and as pressure on Moscow right now. And there's another point worth noting. Trump said that it would be necessary to bring the manufacturing company itself to Ukraine because the process is technically complex, although he added that Ukrainians are very resourceful and will quickly figure it out. It sounds nice, but it means one thing. Without the direct involvement of the American side on site, nothing will get off the ground. So the coming months will show whether this decision will actually be implemented or will remain just a statement at a press conference. Now on to another major piece of news from this summit: money. The leaders of NATO countries adopted a final declaration which set the amount of 140 billion euros in military support for Ukraine for 2026 and 2027. An important nuance: this commitment does not fall on the entire alliance, but specifically on the European NATO members and Canada. The United States is not participating in this amount. The arrangement is as follows. Each year, both in 2026 and 2027, the allies must provide 70 billion euros. Moreover, this is not some new additional money from scratch. For example, this amount includes the EU loan of 90 billion euros, part of which 28.3 billion will go specifically to 2026. In other words, the 140 billion is the total volume of all support programs combined, not a separate new package in addition to what has already been provided. The initiative to specify a concrete amount in the declaration came from Germany and personally from Chancellor Friedrich Merz. The country has already confirmed that it will allocate 11.5 billion euros in 2026. It is also symbolic that, for the first time, the text of the declaration explicitly states Ukraine is not just receiving aid, but is itself contributing to transatlantic security. As in previous declarations, Russia is described as a threat to Euro-Atlantic security. Several other important events also took place on the sidelines of the summit, which are worth mentioning separately. Zelensky signed 3 new bilateral agreements in the drone deal format with Estonia, Denmark, and the Netherlands. This is already the 9th such agreement for Ukraine overall. The format provides for joint production of drones and air defense systems, technology exchange, and for partners, access to Ukrainian weaponry that has been tested in real combat conditions. With Estonia, it was agreed to launch joint production directly on the territory of both countries, including ammunition and early warning systems. With Denmark, we signed an agreement of the same format, although it was officially called more broadly Defense and Security Cooperation. With the Netherlands, there is a separate agreement on technology and arms exports. Although the country's Minister of Defense stated right here in the corridors of the summit that the Netherlands can no longer increase direct military aid, as they are already at the limit of their capabilities. At the summit, Canada announced a new military aid package worth $900 million, which includes air defense systems. Zelensky also held a separate meeting with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. They discussed joint Ukrainian-Norwegian defense production, funding for technologies, and work on a future drone deal specifically with Norway. And here we smoothly transition to the third piece of news. Norway has announced a specific amount. The country's government is allocating 3 billion kroner. That's over 260 million euros, more precisely 268 million, for strengthening Ukraine's air defense. I suggest we watch a short segment from the marathon about exactly where these funds will go.
American-made air defense missiles for Patriot systems. Norway, together with Denmark, Germany, and Canada, will order new missiles directly from the factory in the United States, since the delivery times for some of these missiles are lengthy. Norway plans to purchase them from countries that already have these systems in stock in order to deliver them to Ukraine as quickly as possible. Oslo is also allocating funds to be able to join Ukraine's initiative for joint development of anti-ballistic systems with Europeans.
And here it is worth adding some important context that was not included in the report. Norway is not acting alone, it is coordinating the procurement within the Pearl mechanism together with Denmark, Germany, and Canada. And it is not the only country currently putting pressure on Brussels in this regard. 9 countries at once, the Netherlands, Germany, Finland, Sweden, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Denmark, and Poland have appealed to the European Commission, demanding that it allow the purchase of American air defense missiles as soon as possible within the defense component of that same EU loan of 90 billion euros we just mentioned. In other words, the money already exists on paper. The only question is how quickly Brussels will give the green light for specific purchases. To sum up this entire summit in one sentence, Ukraine left Ankara with a promise of its own Patriot production, a confirmed amount of 140 billion for 2 years, 9 drone agreements, and separate hundreds of millions from Norway and Canada. That's really a lot of decisions in just 2 days. But, as we've already said with the Patriot license, the difference between a signed agreement and an actually functioning production or delivery is always a matter of months and sometimes even years. That's why the most interesting part of this story is still ahead. That's all for today. If after this episode you have even a little more clarity in your mind and not just another pile of headlines, then it means we recorded this for a reason. Subscribe so you don't miss when these promises from Ankara start turning into real deliveries.